Hello, kitty cats. How is everybody doing? Today, I hope everyone is well. Today is Wednesday, and so we have a little Wednesday story time. So, the story I want to tell you guys today is about my mother. Now, my mother um, passed away a few years back, and I I really miss her every single day. Um, she was my buddy, and we did a lot of things together. We really enjoyed each other as adults, um, which a lot of people don't get the privilege of that, knowing a parent as an adult. Um, and dealing with each other on an adult level. And my mother she never used that whole "you're never too big for me to take over my knee" kind of thing, you know. Um, I mean, I was always her child. My brother and sister and I were always her children. Um, but once we were adults, we were never her babies anymore, which was a really nice relationship to have. Um, we really were best friends. Um, Now, when my mother was a teenager, um, and I honestly don't remember exactly what age she was, but she was early teen. And in that time, um, it was the 1950s, and she contracted polio. Um, she was put into the Chester County Hospital, and at the time, she was the worst case of polio um, diagnosed in the county. Um, and actually, maybe even in the state, if I remember correctly. Um, and she was in the hospital for a very long time, and a lot of um, therapy. I do have somewhere photographs of her in the hydro pool, um, and they were really trying to do everything they could at that time to cure polio. There was not a vaccine, obviously, yet. Um, and so she had regained some strength, and they were going to release her and send her home. Now she still couldn't walk, and she was sitting on the edge of her hospital bed one day, and no one else was in the room. And now this is a story that I was told by my mother all my life, so um, I want to make sure I get the story correctly. So she was sitting on the bed um, inside her room. She could sit up, um, but she could not walk. And the doctors told her that she would never walk again and she would never have children. Um, Upsetting news, to say the least. So she was alone in her room, and all of a sudden the room filled with the smell of roses. And there were no flowers in the room. It just overpowered the room, the smell of roses. And she heard a voice speak to her, and it said, "Stand up." And she said that she replied out loud, "I can't." And the voice said, "Pearl," which was her name, "Pearl, stand up." And again she said, "I can't." And then she said she actually felt what felt like hands going under her arms and literally lifting her off the bed into a standing position. And of course, she always referred to that as the hand of God that lifted her off the bed. If my mother did not have faith before, boy, did she have faith after that. My mother then went on to walk and have 3 rotten kids. We was rotten kids. I'm sure we caused my mother more than one sleepless night. And years later, then, when I did refer to my childhood as being a rotten kid, and that I probably caused her a lot of anxiety and sleepless nights, she said to me that I never caused her 1 ounce of anxiety, disappointment, or pain. And I don't know that I necessarily believe that, because I know the kind of kid I was. I was the oldest, and at that point, my mother was married to her second husband, whom I absolutely hated. And the feeling, I think, was mutual. He didn't like me any more than I liked him. And so I was a real smart ass, know it all, loudmouth kid. I mean, I was a smart ass. I was a smart mouth. Talked back a lot, and so I don't necessarily know that I believe that totally, but I believe that she believed it. And I think was very grateful with the way most of us turned out. Um, there was one that was a bit of a worry, and unfortunately, to this day, um, we have very little contact with, um, and it's a shame because my brother and sister are all I have really left of our family. And luckily, I'm close to my sister. Um, we don't we don't talk as much as we should. We don't see each other as much as we should. Um, but we know that we're always there for each other, and I know that I can reach out to her anytime, and she will be there, and vice versa. Um, as the years went on, my mother was a really hard working mother. I mean, we lived in a huge home, huge, which she cleaned all by herself. She cooked dinner every night. We sat down at the dining room table to eat dinner together every single night. Um, and she cooked for 7 people. Um, so, she really was no slouch. Even when she could complain about not feeling well or hurting or not being able to do, she never did. I never once heard my mother complain. Um, and she cleaned that house from top to bottom. She cooked every night. There was a period of time where she actually left the house and worked um, outside the home. And she didn't have to. And I think some of that was she just needed to get away from all of the madness in the house for a couple hours a day. Um, but unfortunately, what happens is that people who in that time period were seemed to be fully cured um, of polio, the symptoms come back, and not necessarily the disease, but the symptoms. And it's a progressive. It's called post polio syndrome, and it's a progressive disease. So the more you use, the more you lose, basically. Um, and my mother was, like I said, she was a go-getter, and she cleaned and she cooked and she, um, shopped. She loved to go shopping and go out to lunch. Shopping and lunch, that was my mother's favorite day. Um, and my mother and I would take vacations together to Florida to visit family. Um, and we'd go down and stay for 10 days and, you know, just never stop the whole time we were there. Excuse me. They would come to my home for holidays every year. Um, and another one of my mother's most favorite things was to come to my house and stay for a couple days. I mean, she'd come and stay for 2 or 3 days, um, and we'd go out to lunch, we'd go shopping, we'd watch movies, we'd do all kinds of stuff. Um, but I could see as the years went on, how she was losing mobility. And towards the end, she just couldn't walk that far anymore. And so we would get her a wheelchair and we would take her in the wheelchair. And then finally, at one point, she couldn't come for holidays anymore. She wasn't coming to stay overnight. And she became very housebound and very bedridden. Um, and it was very sad to see a woman that was so vibrant and so. Uh, they used to say she had a gas ass, which meant she liked to go, get in the car and just go and run and do. Um, so it was very hard to see her sort of wasting away. Um, and then finally, um, I was at work and I got a call um, from my stepfather to tell me that my mother had had a stroke. Um, and I wanted desperately to go. They lived about 40 minutes away. Um, but in the job that I worked at the time, which was the jewelry store, there had to be two people on at all times, and with payroll, there was usually only two people scheduled at a time. So someone would have had to have come in for me, and I'm sure they would have. But my boss at the time was there that day, and our district manager was there that day, and neither one of them even suggested that I leave. In fact, I think my DM said to me, well, people survive strokes all the time. They'll take her to the hospital and she'll be fine. Um, no, she's on hospice. So, yeah, no, they're not going to take her to the hospital. Um, and then, so it was a few hours later that evening, I did get the call that my mother had passed. Um, my sister was able to get there, and unfortunately, I was not able to get there. And I always had some guilt over that, that I wasn't there to say goodbye. Um, Two other people passed away in my mother's home. My one aunt from Florida and my grandmother both passed away in my mother's home, and I was fortunate enough to be there both times. So my mother's passing was the only one that I was not able to get there. Um, so it was very sad. Um, and I feel like we lost the person that was the glue to our family, sort of held us all together. Um, and I miss her. I miss her all the time. Um, I do feel her presence around me, and I feel that she's watching over me, and she's with me, and she knows everything that's going on. Um, but she's kind of got a real busy afterlife because she, I know, watches over me. She watches over my sister. She watches over my niece and nephews. Um, so she's a busy lady. Um, but I'm sure that she is happy um, where she is, and she's with my other family members, the aunts and so forth that have passed. My grandmother, and so I'm sure she's having a good old time over there. Um, but that is about it. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So until I see you the next time, guys, I hope that you have a wonderful week. And please stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe. Don't get fleas. And I'll see you next time, okay? So, bye bye.